So now let's take a look at some of the other common HTML tags and HTML elements that we might be interacting with in our web page. And we'll start by thinking about HTML headings. So big banners at the top of a page, for example, some headline that describes what a page is about. So I'll go ahead into my text editor and create a new file that I'll call headings.html. And the structure of this page is going to be pretty similar to the pages that we've seen before already. So I'm going to start by just using the hello.html text and paste it in here. I'll change the title of the page. Instead of hello, we'll go ahead and call it headings. But inside the body of this page now, I want something a little bit different. I'm going to, inside the body of the page, use an h1 element and say this is a heading, for example. So h1 is a tag that I can use to create a large heading at the top of my page, like for the title of a page, for example. So if I open up headings.html, I might see something that looks like this. A big heading at the top of my page that says this is a heading. H1, where the H stands for heading, and the 1 stands for the largest possible heading. And in fact, HTML gives us a number of different tags that we can use in order to create headings of various sizes. So for example, I could also say h2, inside of which I say this is a smaller heading. If h1 is the largest heading, h2 is the second largest heading. So if I load this page, for example, I now see the h1 at the very top. This is the big heading. And then beneath that, I see this is a smaller heading, the h2. And it turns out there's also h3, h4, h5, all the way down to h6, which is the smallest heading, such that if I load this page now, I have a big heading, a smaller one, and then here's the smallest. So we can often use these h1, h2, h3 tags just for visually organizing text inside of a page. If I want the title of the page, but also I want titles for each of the various different sections and subsections that might be contained within that page as well. So those are headings. And now let's also take a look at some other elements that we might want to add. On web pages, we see not just titles and not just text, but we might also see lists, for example. Like if you've ever used a to-do list program on a web page, for example, you might see a list of things that you need to do. Or other web pages might display lists of information. And it turns out that HTML has two basic types of lists. We have ordered lists for things that are in a particular order, like item number 1, item number 2, item number 3. And we have unordered lists for lists that don't have any particular order. So just bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, for example. And both are quite easy to use. I'll go ahead and create a new file. And we'll call this lists.html. And again, in lists.html, I'll copy the same structure from hello.html. We're again going to have doctype HTML just to indicate the version of HTML. Most of the heading is the same. I'm just going to change the title from hello to lists. And then we're going to replace the body of this page to show some different information here. So let me first show what an ordered list might look like, something that has numbers, 1, 2, 3. And ordered list as an HTML tag is just OL, OL for ordered list. So I can add a tag that says OL. And now inside of my OL element, my ordered list element, I need a new element for every list item. List item, we're going to abbreviate to just li. So the li tag in HTML is what we're going to use to designate an item inside of an HTML list. So here, for example, I could say li and then first item. And then I could do the same thing. Li second item, and then again li third item. So what I have here are some elements, and then elements nested within other elements. I have an ordered list element, inside of which are 3 other HTML elements. 3 list items that are each indicating each of the individual items that are inside of my HTML list. I can now open this up by opening lists.html. And this is what I see. I see an ordered list where I have item number 1, first item, second item, third item. Note that I didn't actually need to, in the HTML anywhere, specify the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3. When my web browser reads that this should be an ordered list, my web browser, Chrome in this case, just adds those numbers in for me because it knows what an ordered list means, and it knows how to take the HTML that I've written and display it in the way that I intend to the user. Now, in addition to ordered lists that all have numbers, 1, 2, 3, we also have unordered lists that are just bullet points of information. So I could, up above, add some more content to this HTML page. I can say here is an unordered list. And just as an ordered list, we represented using the OL tag in HTML, OL standing for ordered list. Likewise, we can use the UL tag in HTML to create an unordered list, U for unordered. So here we're going to add a UL tag. And again, my text editor here is automatically adding the closing tag here, this /UL, meaning the end of the unordered list. And many text editors will do this now, just so you, the programmer, don't forget to add that. And now inside of this unordered list, we're again going to have some list items. Also using the li tag, here is one item, and here is another item, and here is yet another item. If I go ahead and refresh the page now, I'm still on list.html. I now see that on top of my ordered list, I have an unordered list, where each item, instead of being numbered 1, 2, 3, is instead labeled with just bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, where each of these bullet points and each of these numbered items is a list item element, or an li. So hopefully now we can see that as we start to explore these various different HTML tags and nesting HTML tags inside of one another, we're able to create more and more interesting web pages as a result. So let's explore now what other types of web pages we can create using other types of HTML elements. In addition to lists, one thing you might imagine is that one of the important things on the web is not just displaying text, but also displaying other types of media, like images, for example. So how might we go about doing that? Well, I can, for example, let's go back into my text editor. Let me create a new file that I'm going to call image.html, which is going to contain some code for displaying some images. I'll go ahead and go into hello.html and copy this text into the page. Again, change the title to image. And now inside of the body, I'm going to add a new tag called image. And the image tag has a couple of required attributes. Remember that attributes are what we saw before, things like adding a lang equals en to the top of my page to indicate that this web page is written in English, for example. And the image tag has a couple of required attributes that I need to add. In particular, when I display an image on the page, I need to specify what image I actually want displayed, for example. So I might specify image src, short for source, is going to be equal to what image do I actually want to display on this page. And it just so happens that inside of my folder where I have image.html, I have an image called cat.jpg. So I'm just going to specify cat.jpg as the file name of the image that I want to display. And it turns out that images also have a second required attribute. In addition to the file name or the link to whatever image I want to display, I also need to provide some alternative text, a text-based representation of what you're going to see on the image. Because in some cases, some web browser might not be able to render the image correctly. You might imagine if there's some error rendering the image, or if someone's on a slow internet connection, or if someone's using a screen reader and therefore can't actually see the image. We want some text-based representation of that image as well. And so I'll provide some alt text, some alternative text that can be used to substitute the image in case for some reason we can't display the image. And the alt text that I'll use in this case is just going to be the word cat, for example. And that's all I need. Now notice in particular, there's something a little bit different about this image tag compared to other tags that we've seen before, in the sense that it doesn't have a closing tag. In the sense that the body had a beginning of the body and an end of the body. Our ordered list had a beginning of the ordered list and the end of the ordered list with list items in between. It doesn't really make sense for an image, for example, to have the beginning of the image and the end of the image and some content in between, because the image is just a single HTML element that can't really have anything inside of it. So in that sense, we don't actually need a closing image tag. The image tag is self-closing. It is its own beginning and end. So we can just say we want an image to be here that is cat.jpg with an alternative text of just the word cat, for example. So now, if I open up image.html, we'll see that what gets loaded is quite large, a picture of a cat. And I can scroll around and see this entire image. Of course, this picture of a cat is probably larger than I wanted it to be. When my user visits this web page, I don't want them to have to scroll all the way to the right in order to see the entire cat. So I can actually add additional HTML attributes in order to modify the size of the image that I'm displaying. And later, we'll see we can use CSS to do a similar thing as well. But for now, what I can add is an additional attribute and say that let me give cat.jpg, this image tag, another attribute that in this case I'll just call width. And I'll say that width is going to be equal to 300, because I would like for this image to be 300 pixels wide, for example. So now if I refresh this page, I now see that the same cat image appears, except now it appears at 300 pixels wide exactly. So I'm able to add additional attributes, additional information to control how an HTML element is going to appear. In this case, I want to control its width, and it automatically scales down the height to make sure that the image is proportional as well. Now, on the internet, in addition to just displaying information on a single page, it's also common for a page to link to other pages. In fact, that's one of the main important values of the internet, is the ability to go from one page to another via these links. And so one thing we might reasonably want to do is add some links to our page, where if you click on something, you're taken to another page altogether. So let's take a look at an example of that. I'll create a new file based on hello.html, and I'll add lang equals English for good measure. And I'll call this new file link.html, where here we're going to practice with building some links into our HTML page. I'll copy the content of hello.html again, call this link. And in order to create a link, I'm going to use a tag called the A tag, short for the anchor tag. And the A tag takes one important attribute, which is called href, for hyperlink reference, which is going to specify what page I would like to link to. So if, for example, I wanted, when a user clicks on this link, to go to google.com, then I'd set the href attribute of this tag equal to https://google.com, for example. Then inside of the A tag, I would specify what text I want to display. What text should the user see, such that when the user clicks on that text, they're taken to the web page. In this case, I'm just going to say something like click here, for instance. Now, if I open up link.html, this is what the user sees. They see a blue link that says click here. And when the user does click on that link, they're taken to https://google.com. And it turns out that we can use this href attribute not only to link to different websites altogether, but we can link to different pages on the same website. So for example, if I wanted to link to that cat page that I designed a moment ago, instead of linking to google.com, I could instead just link to image.html. And now if I save that and refresh, or if I open up link.html again, now I see a click here link, where when I click on click here, now I'm taken to that page, cat image.html, that happened to have that picture of the cat from before. So using these anchor tags and href attributes, we're able to link together multiple pages, so that if we have a website that has many different web pages, we can connect them all together by using a combination of these various different links. So